Reading aloud. Today we're going to teach you how to do reading aloud, and I'll provide you what are some of the steps that you can remember during reading aloud, and I will also show you some examples of what are the good things that you can do and what are the negative examples, and I hope that this video will help you for this section in your English oral examination. Let's begin. The first criteria in marking your reading aloud, the way that teacher grade your reading aloud is through this section called pronunciation and articulation. What you should do is when you read, you should pronounce every word clearly. What you should not do is mumble. Let's look at a good example of good reading, good pronouncing of every word clearly in the next slide. So in this example, we will be looking at the same example for for all the examples. But this time around, I would demonstrate reading clearly. So in this paragraph, to demonstrate reading clearly, it would sound like this. In a twinkling of an eye, we arrived at our destination, and my reluctant younger brother alighted from the train reluctantly. "Can we ride on a train again?" he pleaded. I smiled and nodded my head. Upon reflection, I'm still impressed by how the MRT enables mass transportation in major traffic areas to meet public travel needs. This is how you should read clearly.
We have looked at what we should do during reading aloud, that is to read clearly. Now we'll look at what we should not do during reading aloud, that is to mumble. I shall demonstrate an example. In twinkling of an eye, we arrived at our destination, and my reluctant younger brother alighted from the train reluctantly. "Can we ride a train again?" he pleaded. I smiled and nodded my head. So note, that is mumbling. Do not do this during reading aloud.
The second criteria that a teacher will mark your reading aloud is based on your rhythm and fluency. What you should do is to read at an appropriate pace. You should pause for a while when you see a comma, and you should also pause a bit longer when you see a full stop, exclamation, or question mark. What you should not do is to read too slowly, or if you read too fast. And you should also not continue at commas, full stops, exclamation, or question marks without pausing. Let's look at a good example of rhythm and fluency. An example of a good rhythm and fluency. Do remember that at every comma we have to pause for a while, and also at every full stop, and also, if possible, at every question mark and exclamation mark. So a good example will sound like this. In a twinkling of an eye, we arrived at our destination, and my reluctant younger brother alighted from the train reluctantly. "Can we ride on a train again?" he pleaded. I smiled and nodded my head. Do note that I'm not rushing as I read, and I paused appropriately at every punctuation that I need to pause at.
Okay, we have heard about how to speak at a good place, and now we're going to show you what you should not do, that is to speak too slowly. In the twinkling of an eye, we
arrived at our destination and my reluctant younger brother alighted from the train reluctantly. This is an example of what you should not do during reading aloud because it is reading too slowly. We should also not read too fast during reading aloud. This is an example of reading too fast. In the twinkling of an eye, we arrived at our destination and my reluctant younger brother alighted from the train reluctantly. This is reading too fast and not showing good pace.
The third criteria that a teacher will mark your reading aloud is based on your expressiveness. What you should do is that you should express feelings as you read the passage. Do also note that if you see exclamation mark like this, you can, based on the passage, it could be either a shout, it could be in an angry tone, or it could even mean excitement. If you see a question mark like this, it can either be an asking feeling, or it could be a begging feeling. What you should not do is to speak like a robot, or if you're too dramatic, it would not add on to the marks for reading aloud in this criteria. Let's look at a good example. Okay, a good example of showing good expressiveness that you should show feelings. So in this passage, I'll read it with feelings. It should sound like this. In a twinkling of an eye, we arrived at our destination, and my reluctant younger brother alighted from the train reluctantly. "Can we ride on the train again?" he pleaded. I smiled and nodded my head. Do note that whenever you see a question mark, you should look for the context of the passage, and in this case it is pleading, so you should read it as, "Can we ride on a train again?" Let's look at a bad example.
Now we have listened to how you should read with feelings. Now what you should not be doing is to read in a robotic manner. Now let me show you an example of reading in a robotic manner. In a twinkling of an eye, we arrived at our destination, and my reluctant younger brother alighted from the train reluctantly. "Can we ride on the train again?" he pleaded. I smiled and nodded my head. What you should not do is also to read in a dramatic manner. Now let me show you an example of how you read in a dramatic manner. In a twinkling of my eye, we arrived at our destination, and my reluctant younger brother alighted from the train reluctantly. "Can we ride on the train again?" he pleaded. I smiled and nodded my head. Do not read in a dramatic manner. This will not add on to the marks for reading aloud.
That's the end of our reading aloud lesson. Happy practicing. Bye.